Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, How to Achieve Project Success with Your Outsourced Team. My name is Vishwajit Sande, and I'm going to be the host for you today. So I'll talk a bit about myself, and then we'll go on with the webinar. So I'm the head of delivery at Mindbowser. I have around 10 years of experience into the tech industry, and I've helped around 20 plus startups to build their first version or MVP, or you can say the initial launch, what they've done. Along with that, I have 5+ years of experience into running the Google design sprints. That's a small introduction about me. Let's move ahead. So to make this webinar a bit interesting, we have one giveaway towards the end, but I'm going to talk a bit about it here. So the CEO of Mindbowser, Ayush Jain, he has written a book named The Zero Hiccup Way to Building a Technology Company. So in order to get a free copy of the book, after the webinar, you can just write a small LinkedIn post about your learning from the webinar, and you can tag me, Vishwajit Sande, and Mindbowser INC into the post in the next 24 hours. And the first 5 people to do it will get a free copy of the book. Let's start with understanding what we'll cover today. So we'll start off with talking a bit about the numbers, the facts and numbers. Then we'll talk about why outsourced projects fail. We'll also talk about the developing outsourcing strategy, then choosing the right outsourcing partner, working with outsourced team, and then monitoring team progress, along with the book giveaway and the Q&A. Starting with where are we? So we are currently at the state of talking about the facts and numbers. So the outsourcing has been in there for quite a while, and the overall market value for global outsourcing is 92.5 billion, and it is also estimated that by the year 2026 it is going to be 425 billion. Talking a bit more about what has been the major motivation of the of people around the globe into outsourcing. So the major motivation lies around, let's say, cutting down the cost. So 59% of the companies, those who outsource, believe that the outsourcing helps them to cut down the cost. 57 of them believe that with outsourcing, they can focus more on the core business values and the core business part, as compared to the rest of the outsourced team can work on building the technology product for them. 47 of them believe that with outsourcing, they can solve the capacity issues, and 20% believe that outsourcing can help them meet the business needs. We'll be talking a bit more about this in the subsequent slides. So let's talk a bit about why outsourced projects fail. And to discuss that in detail, I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 case studies. So we'll talk first about the IBM and Queensland disaster. So what it is all about. So in the year December 2007, Queensland state had come to a conclusion that they need a new payroll for their health department. And in order to get that built, they hired IBM with around a 6 billion deal. And it was supposed to be completed by mid of 2008. But over a period of time, as the months passed by, there were some unexpected technical problems from IBM, and they eventually told Queensland state that now the project deal, which was supposed to be 6 billion, would be 27 million. A huge difference, I would say, more than 4 times. This actually kept on dragging for years, and eventually, when the final product came out, it was full with errors. There were no salaries that were going out of the platform, and eventually, to few people, there were more salaries that were given out. And over the years, the total project cost ended at 1.2 billion, which was actually started with 6 million, and now it ended at 1.2 billion. All of this drastically affected even IBM, and where Queensland State actually banned IBM from getting any of the government projects in Queensland State. So this was really a huge disaster. We'll talk a bit about another case where, let's say, the state of Indiana and IBM, where the state of Indiana had decided that they wanted to modernize their welfare processing system. And it was supposed to be a 1.6 billion deal with IBM again. And eventually, when the final system was out, it was full of errors. And there were even complaints from people saying that there are long wait times for the applicants. Eventually, there was state of Indiana actually sued IBM, and it ended up into the court where IBM proved that there were a lot of instances where support was needed from the state of Indiana, the client, but that was not provided, and owing to all of this, it became a total disaster for them. Something similar happened with Accenture and Hertz. So Hertz is a car rental company, and it was a time when Uber and Lyft were really taking all the market. So what Hertz wanted to do was they wanted to actually digitalize and revolutionize their entire platform, so their online presence, and that's where they hired Accenture. The supposed deadline was they started in August 2016. Supposed deadline was around December 2017, which eventually failed and went to January 2018, again failed and gone to April 2018. But with a lot of delays throughout this process, so what Hertz thought was it was a time to reassess because of all of these delays, and they found out that the product and the design apparently didn't do even half of what was expected out of it. So eventually, Hertz actually sued Accenture for 32 million. So what does all of this tell us? There could be some common factors between all of these failures. So let's talk a bit about those common factors. And what I was able to figure out was in the case of, let's say, the Hertz and even So in the case of Hertz, the major problem was there was no direct involvement of them with the development team. So because eventually what happened was at the end of the project, they were able to figure out that 50% was not done. So that was a huge failure. The another gap was the communication gap, because there was again one more case study which I explained where IBM told that the client was not giving as much support as needed. So there's a lot of communication gaps happening. Overall, there was also low quality work delivered with a lot of errors into the platform and the conflicting interests. Because eventually, as a client, the end goal is getting high skilled labor and a high quality product, while the supplier or the company who is actually the product is being outsourced to, they try to do it at a lower cost with, let's say, a less skilled labor or something. So this is kind of a conflicting interest. So these are the possible reasons why an outsourced project would fail. So what do we do next in order to make sure that whenever you are outsourcing any of your projects, how we can ensure that they do not fail or they do not go into any of these buckets of what we are seeing right now on the screen? So we'll talk about developing the outsourcing strategy and how that could be developed. So it is always said that companies with a clear vision of their strategic and tactical objectives before entering into an outsourcing agreement have much better chance of succeeding and running that product in a much better way. So what does that also mean? It also means that laying out your objectives why you are outsourcing is very important. So let's talk a bit about why and how it can be helpful, the laying of the objectives. Because once those objectives are laid out and are in front of the company, the entire management team, they can easily communicate that with the team with whom they are going to outsource the project to. These objectives that are laid out could also be used as a base to set the agreement. Then is choosing the right staff augmentation model. Because once these objectives are laid out, life becomes much easy, I would say, so as to make sure that like what kind of model I want to go out with. If I've laid out that, okay, I need resources for X number of months, I can easily go with a time and material model. If I'm going to lay out my objective that I want to get a specific portion of my product to be built out, I can go with a fixed cost model. So these models we can easily figure out based on the objectives that are laid out. And eventually, it is always said that if you have something in writing and in front of you all the time, you tend to stick to it. So that is also equally important, I'd say. So while you are building the outsourcing strategy, another important thing is how do you assess these risks? So first is influence on the development strategy. This is kind of an fear mostly, because let's say you as a company, if you are outsourcing your core part of building the platform, this would be one risk, that do you really have the influence over the kind of development methodology they are going to use, or the kind of third parties they are going to use. So this could be one of the risks you can assess, that you should always have a say on what's going on, and all the approvals should go to you, go from you. Another thing is an unanticipated expenditure. Most of the time, it also happens that when a contract gets signed, there are some anticipations made during signing the contract that, okay, in this provider's package, there are this X number of services to be provided, and the contract is signed. But eventually, when the actual work starts, the provider can come back to you and say that, these are the services what we had agreed upon, but we also need these 2-3 more services, which are were not part of that initial deal. So these are kind of unanticipated expenditures. It is always good to assess this way before signing any of the contracts. Then the language barriers. Of course, when you are outsourcing the product development or your project development, it can be outsourced to many overseas countries. So language could be one of the barriers you have to think or assess way before time, because when you are working thousands of miles apart, your communication is the only thing that is going to keep a bridge between what you're expecting and what is going to be delivered. And then the time zone factors. You should also see that can the development team or the outsourced team actually overlaps a few hours of your time zone, because then it keeps your life also easy, so that if there are any blockers for the team, they can eventually get in touch with you and get them figured ASAP. So after looking at the assessing the risk, the next thing to do is defining the scope or the skills. So I want to emphasize on this part, which is clearly defining the scope of your project. There should not be any kind of assumptions to be made from either party, because you as a client, you shouldn't let the supplier team or the provider team decide or make assumptions that, okay, for example, I'm building a login, a project is supposed to build a login feature with Facebook, or it is written that, okay, social logins. There should be no room for any kind of a confusion later on that, okay, when I say social logins, the definition might be different for both the teams. For the client team, it might be all logins, all kind of social logins included in it. And for the provider team, it might be just the standard logins of Facebook, LinkedIn, or Google. So these are smaller things, but they really make a lot of difference when you define that entire scope. So that scope needs to be clearly defined if you're going with a fixed scope project. If you're going with a time and material where, let's say, the outsourced team is eventually going to work with your team or your dev team, so that time defining the skills, what you're looking for is really important because as this outsourced team is going to work hand in hand with your team, you should always look for those skills that complement to your developers. So eventually the end goal would be much bigger. And as I already said that like the scope definition should be so accurate that there should be no room for assumptions. Yeah. So now we are at a stage where, let's say, the objectives are defined. Then we also assess the risk, and now we have defined the scope. So what's next? So the next thing is defining the financial terms, which is very, very important, right? Because even if you saw in the case study, there were instances where the actual agreement and where that cost actually blew up to. So, so all of that could be avoided by defining the financial terms. So setting out the development budget and payment terms. This is actually helpful for both the teams, even for your provider and for you as a company when you're outsourcing. Because if you set out that development budget, you always make sure that you stick to that budget or around that budget. And there are no instances where a project needs to stop or something like that. And even deciding the payment terms is equally important. Then is defining the payment schedules. When do the payments go out? Like what are the terms against those? So defining that clearly into the contract, it actually saves a lot of headache at a later stage of time. And the third is set process around approval of cost overages. I've also seen this in like few of the instances where there is not a like a proper cost approval defined for a project. Let's say because usually this happens when a fixed cost project is going on and some additional features are to be built out. So the normal approach is for a provider to estimate it out, get back to the customer and tell that, okay, this would be the time and the cost required for it to get an approval and build it out. But I've seen with a few of my customers who had actually left their previous outsourced partners and then eventually working with us. So that time they shared their experiences where the previous team actually started building out just based on the requirement without even informing what would be the cost and the time required for it. And then they bumped this all into the final invoice, and that really came out to be a surprise. So there should be a proper process that should be set from the company itself, I would say, so as to make sure nothing of this sort happens. Moving to the next part is again very critical, I would say, is appointing a single point of contact, or we call it SPOC. So how this helps is for a smoother communication. Again, because you might be having your management team sitting at one place. It could be a group of people. On the outsourced team side, there could be team members, 8 to 10 team members, and so on. So this communication has to go on, but usually it is always good to have a single point of contact at both the ends, and then they become responsible for communicating between the teams and also with their own team members. So that actually makes the communication much smoother. Also, it all helps for a fast exchange of information, because most of the times when you have a team which is really spread out throughout the world, and so that time, let's say if there is not a single point of contact, then usually the conversations just get delayed because no one is responsible for, or no one is owning that conversation. With single point of contact, like that actually goes out, and there is a more faster exchange of information and even decisions. And of course, that will also help into eventually the project management at both ends. Moving on, choosing the right outsourcing partner. Now we have the developing out, the outsourcing strategy is clear. Now, how do you actually choose the right outsourcing partner? So first of all, very, very, very important is look for expertise. Look at the technical expertise of the team, because that is something which is crucial for your technology product you are building. like always look that is the CTO or someone from the technical team or an architect comes to your calls on the initial days, trying to talk and define what needs to be built out, and even they sharing their examples of some work that they have done, or let's say they sharing with you that some of their own case studies talking about their technical expertise. That is something you should always be looking for. Second thing is always look for similar projects if they have done something similar in the past. There might be chances that not exactly things might be similar to what you need, but there could be the outsourcing team must have worked on it in bits and pieces here and there. So you can look for such similar project so as to make sure that there's no learning curve or at least a minimum learning curve. And the third point here is experience in solving complex problems. This usually comes into picture, and why it is important is there are some risks which cannot be anticipated at the start of the project. Eventually, when you go into it, you might figure out that okay, during development there are more complex things coming into picture. So does the team have an experience, or do they have any of the previous case studies where they have solved some really complex problems? For example, built out some rule engine or something like that, which eventually gave a lot of good results. So something like that you can look for. It is again just trying to see whether the team is capable of doing all those things. And the last is, does that team really have a passion for your project? This might be the last point on this slide, but it is very important because like unless and until you have a passion for building a product, you won't be doing that, or the development team won't be doing that with the same dedication or devotion. So like you really need to see, or if you happen to go with the time and material model, it is always good to ask the developer that what excites you about my project, or what is the best thing you liked about my project, what is the thing you didn't like about my project. These answers could give you just more about like can talk a bit about are they really passionate about your project. Moving forward with the next point around choosing the right outsourcing partner is ask for references. Always ask for 2 to 3 references of their previous clients, and make sure that you talk to these clients. It is always good to drop an email to know, but I would always recommend to talk to them over a phone call. And the only reason is with these conversations with the previous clients, you can verify if the experiences what these clients had are in line with what are your expectations from this outsourcing partner. And if they meet, then that is your way to go ahead. The next one is communication skill and proactiveness. So you can evaluate the communication skills of the project manager or the team who is going to work with you. And these initial days are also important because let's say you are yet to sign an agreement with this prospective team, outsourcing team. And during this time period, how has been your experience with this team? Whether it is sales team, whether it is management from the other team, but how has been that experience? Are they proactive enough to maybe follow up with you, maybe ask you those right questions? Because like that experience is also going to be same like throughout when you work with that development team. So it actually talks a bit about the culture. It talks a bit about how the teams like work eventually with the client. So getting that experience is very, very important, I would say. Yeah, pick who understands importance of planning, because it is always said that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you should always look out for the teams who emphasize on planning, because the teams who spend more time into planning eventually are the ones who are going to give you more success, because that's how they're going to plan their, let's say, their sprints. They're going to plan how the workflows are going to be. They're going to plan your milestones and even your deliveries. So look for always like when you understand the process of that team, always look for how much time they are allocating for planning. If they haven't allocated time, you can ask specific questions about it to know that are they really going in that direction of planning. So now the strategy is fixed. You know which outsourcing partner you're going to go with. So how do you actually work with the outsourced team? And this is very important because these are smaller steps. If you see as a whole, these are really small steps, but they're going to bring out large results for you. So first is setting the onboarding process for the new team members. So while you set the onboarding process for the new team members, always make sure that you are sharing the vision and the product map with the team. And why it is important is because unless and until your team starts believing into your vision, they are not going to bring out the results what you are expecting them to give out. So always make sure that even if it is a single team member joining your team, make sure that you clear out your vision to them. So I'm just going to share one example of a product roadmap. If you see here, like over a period of time, what are the plans? This product roadmap also gives the team or your outsourced team as well an idea about what you are planning to launch, what are the dates around it, so that like all of this actually gives everyone that sense of ownership that, okay, when I'm working on it, these are my priorities. This would be the next thing I have to work upon. These are my delivery dates. So it gives them that sense of ownership. And that is important when you work with these teams. Second is giving the product walkthrough. So if you are at a stage that a part of the product is already built out, so it is always good to give that product walkthrough to the team so as to make sure that everyone is on the same page, and then the team can pick those things and move ahead with it. Always record this vision meeting call recordings, and I'll also tell a reason why. Because first time when you talk about your vision with your team, that level of energy might get lost when you're repeating it with the rest of your newly joined team members. So it is always good to record those vision meetings and make sure that these vision meeting recordings are passed on to the team. And last is introduce the entire team over video calls. So it is always good to have a face to the voices. So like when a new team member joins, make sure that all of your team on both like offshore, onshore is on a video call, talking, discussing about them, getting to know each other in a better way, so that they can bond and work in a good fashion. So that was all about setting up the like onboarding process. Let's talk about like why considering your team member, like even if it is an outsourced team, as your own team member is important, because a passionate team member will help you achieve the difficult goal. As I've already said this, when you get to know that, okay, this person or this team member is passionate about my goal, you throw any problem at them, they are going to find a way out of it. And all of this is going to happen only when you consider them as own. If there are conversations or meetings and calls that, okay, your team did this, my team did this, these conversations could actually like take you apart from like calling them your own, because then you actually are drawing a line between these two teams, and that is something you should completely avoid. Next is build ownership with your team, and that's again, ownership becomes like two ways thing. Unless and until you show trust into your team member, they are not going to show it, and eventually they will like start taking more and more ownership. Next is knowing your team. I have seen this in the past with a few of my customers as well, that they tend to take monthly or quarterly one-on-ones with the team, and the only reason is not just to get a feedback or something, but more to know them as a person. Like what are their professional goals, and how I can align those professional goals with with the work I'm assigning to them. Because let's say there are few people on the team who are really good. They are into one team. They want to move to another team, let's say, or another role into the same project itself. So if that is their professional goal, so as a client, I would say I would see that okay, if this person is really good, if he is taking the ownership, and if he wants to go into another team, and I have a room for it, why don't I help him with it? That will also build a lot of loyalty of that team members with you. So this having this monthly or quarterly one-on-ones really help. Next is feedback. Be open to feedback, because it's not always that the customer has to give feedback to the outsourced team, but the customer should also be open to collect feedback from the outsourced team. The one-on-one meetings, the monthly or quarterly, those are right time to ask for any personal feedback. Or another best way is to get the real feedback is sending anonymous feedback forms, and you can send to the entire team and collect it. And last is setting monthly calls with the management team of the outsourced team, so as to make sure that the team feedback is also passed on to the team members. Very, very important thing is setting expectations from both sides. It is not just important that an agreement is set and that means the expectations are set. It is just a half work done. Setting expectations when you actually start working on a project are equally important, because when you want the team to take the ownership, you are also responsible, or you are also accountable as a customer or a client for half of the things of it. So it is always better to set an expectation around who is going to do what part and what are the responsibilities of each and every person. So it is always good to define a process document. I'll show you a couple of examples here. So this is from one of my projects where we have defined like what would be the code review for the PR process. Sorry. So we have clearly defined that how many times in a week we'll meet, and what would be the timings, how those PR processes should go on and all. So let's say there are two processes in this project. We are divided into two processes. One is a live code review over the calls, or the another one is screen recording, which needs to be attached to whenever a developer is doing a PR. So something like processes, something like that. Or I'll give another example of, let's say in this project, like for a Jira workflow, what should be the potential Jira workflow? What do each of these definitions mean? Who is responsible for what, for changing the status of the tickets to which status to what status and all. So this might be like smaller things in terms of like a process or a document, but this is going to avoid any kind of a confusion, and people who are into those roles have clearly defined things that, okay, I'm responsible for this, and then they can take ownership of that piece. The next part is defining clear roles and responsibilities, as I already talked about it. And then the defining an escalation matrix, because not always things are going to go smooth. So there could be a possible ups and downs in the project. So what would be the potential escalation matrix in such cases? So like you can see on the screen, like this is a escalation matrix, what we follow for Mindbowser. But this is the path. The first escalation point is the project lead or the project manager. Then it eventually comes to the delivery head, and then it can be, again, if there is no resolution, it can be escalated to the higher management. So these are the normal escalation paths. So having these kind of documents or this clarity will make sure that the expectations are set from both the ends. So now that expectations are set, your team is already working on it and things are going very smooth. So how do you actually monitor the progress of the team? Because you do not want to land up into how few of the customers have landed up during when we discuss the case study. So how do you actually monitor that, okay, things are going on track smoothly? So first is retrospective meetings. I actually recommend this a lot. There are a lot of times when people tend to skip these meetings with their outsourced team, but these are very important. And these are, please understand, these are very different from the one-on-ones you are having with the team members, because these retrospective meetings are going to give a chance to reflect on what has been happening and how it can be improved in the further sprints or in the further work that is being done. But to have these retrospective meetings, there has to be an environment created for constructive criticism, I would say. So as to everyone takes that feedback in such a way that, okay, it's an eventually a team goal to accomplish that, and how to improve in the further work. The second is be open to see the challenges and improve, as I already said. So this retrospective meetings are really important while you see the progress, the team progress, and because it is a chance that like you can learn from that past and make sure that that mistakes do not happen in the future. And setting up the measurable metrics. Uh, while so I've seen this in few instances where when we say like setting up measurable metrics, people usually tend to track each and every aspect of the project, and that is something which should be avoided, because like tracking metrics and micromanaging are two different things. Like if you tend to track each and every small aspect and ask questions about it, that actually doesn't like give them the sense of ownership or being part of your team. So like try to avoid micromanagement and instead create metrics around task completeness and the quality of delivery. So something which is more like measurable. So I'll show you some examples of task completeness. So if you see this metrics, this is more about like overview of a particular sprint, that how many things are getting resolved, where do we stand in terms of sprint completeness. Okay, here we are at 51%. Like what's the total duration, like how much is completed, how much is yet to be done. Or it could be around the status report for a particular sprint in terms of how many are the open issues, or how many are in progress, how many are ready for QA, how many are verified, which gives you like lot of insight about how the things are going on. You can also track metrics around issue type, like so whether how many bugs are there, how many of them are improvement, how many of the total story is subtask, like. And of course, the assignee, like based on your team members, how much tasks are assigned to some of the team members, how many of them have completed, what's the completion percentage, and so on. So these could be like kind of, I would say, high level metrics, talking more about the completeness rather than going into nitty gritties of how many hours are burned, like is the developer really spending 8 hours and so on. And then is the quality of delivery, which is equally important, because when you are expecting a delivery, it shouldn't be that things are just being delivered without maintaining that quality of the code. So like even at Mindbowser, we use Code Grip. It's an automated code review platform, which talks about like, let's say, what's the reliability score of the code that has been written, what's the maintainability, what has been the coverage, or let's say how many lines of codes are duplicated, and so on. So it gives you an insight about where does the quality of your code that has been written stands. So this is all about setting the measurable metrics and how you're going to measure all of it. So that brings me actually towards the end of like talking about how you can run successfully the project. And the next point I have is about the book giveaway. I talked about it, but as I'll just quickly talk about it, and we can move to the Q&A. And that is like just make, if you really like this webinar talk, please post about it on LinkedIn. Let me know that what is the part you like. If you have more questions, feel free to post it there. And please make sure that you tag me and Mindbowser into it, and you can get a free copy of the Zero Hiccup book. So now I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the Q&A section and I can take them one by one.